Frank, if you could explain a little bit more in terms of what would make Senator Obama change his mind on the KORUS FTA, and what realistically could we expect in terms of renegotiation or modification or something along those lines. I think a lot of people in the audience would like to hear that. But first, microphone back to Mike.
Well, we'll get into a lot of these in the Q&A. Let me respond to just three things that came up. I didn't make comparisons because I was expecting the Q&A, but I'm happy to begin discussing them now. On China, there is no containment. I don't know who's advocating containment in the McCain camp. I haven't met them. Senator McCain was one of the leaders on the Republican side in passing PNTR for China. His statements on China have emphasized the fact that we have overlapping interests. In many ways, our interests that we share with China are growing, but we have different value systems. We have areas where we disagree, and we need to work on those. That's very much the position he's long had, and one within the mainstream bipartisan approach to China of the past few decades. On KORUS and FTA, so it's useful to sort of wind back a little and remember what happened with the FTA negotiations with the Congress. The U.S. and Korea reached an agreement, and USTR in the White House brought it to the Democratic leadership in the democratically controlled Congress. And Speaker Pelosi and others said, not good enough, renegotiate. Trade Minister Kim, our Korean colleagues, were not happy, but they agreed to do it. We renegotiated. Addressed exactly the issues that the Democratic leadership said had to be addressed. As Trade Minister Kim was landing at the airport to sign the agreement, Nancy Pelosi, Congressman Levin, Congressman Rangel held a press conference with no warning to the administration or the Congress, announcing that they rejected once again this new agreement, even though the administration had done exactly what they'd asked for to get congressional support. My understanding is that Sue Schwab, the USTR, got this on her BlackBerry as it was, being announced that she was going to meet Trade Minister Kim. That's not how you treat allies. The hope in the administration, I think the hope in Seoul was that at that point, people knew Senator Clinton would oppose it. They hoped Senator Obama would at least stay neutral or be quiet, because the concern was that if he came out against it, it would make it too easy for Democrats to kill support for this. And there's a good group of free trade Democrats who would have supported it. And I suspect what happened was the Democratic leadership didn't want their caucus to split. The proponents of the free trade agreement hoped Senator Obama would stay neutral, so at least there would be some basis for building support. He didn't. He came out against it, and I think surprised people in the same way they were surprised by the Speaker's opposition. He did that, I think, for understandable tactical political reasons. He was in a death match with Hillary Clinton for votes in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and the labor union vote was very important, and he made a political decision. But he did not make a decision, I think, that took into account the merits of the case, the national interest in our position in Asia. Leadership on trade is about explaining the benefits of free trade. Free trade agreements never add up to a perfect list of symmetry. Autos, symmetrical. Services, symmetrical. Agricultural, symmetrical. Free trade agreements are about leadership at the top to make the overall package fit together so that people in both sides of the aisle, workers, consumers, business, benefit. That's what leadership is on trade. And Senator McCain knew the politics of this one, but he also believed that the American people were looking for leadership, and that's why he's been a strong advocate of the FTA. I hope, that Senator Obama, when he's back in the Senate on November 5th, decides to support it, or whatever he's doing at the time.
Well, he will be back on November 5th.
I hope he decides. Yeah, that's true. I hope he decides to support it because it's in the national interest. I think the opposition is not based on the economic merits. The idea that we need that we've lost the public on free trade is not about the American public. At the end of the day, it's about leadership, and I think that leadership demonstrated after November 4th could pass this if politicians decide to do the right thing. On North Korea, it's true, John McCain said we need to look at military options in 1993. So did Secretary of Defense Bill Perry. So did Assistant Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. So did Arnie Cantor, the Undersecretary of State under George Bush. people were saying, and Bill Clinton himself rightly said, it's unacceptable for North Korea to develop nuclear weapons. Senator McCain was skeptical, deeply skeptical about the agreed framework. I worked in the Pentagon in the mid-'90s, and a Marine, one-star came back who had been sent to brief Senator McCain on the agreed framework. The hope was that because he had a Marine uniform and a bunch of Vietnam War medals, McCain would go easy on him. He came back and said, that was horrible. Because Senator McCain said, how are you going to prove to me that the North Koreans are not going to cheat? He was right. As Jack and I learned in October 2002, the North Koreans did cheat with the clandestine uranium enrichment program. So, the McCain approach is not against diplomacy. He's been quite clear about that. He's supported engagement in the case of Pyeongchang with China, normalization with Vietnam, and he said quite clearly he supports diplomacy in this effort. But diplomacy is a means and not an ends. And to think that the decision of whether North Korea develops nuclear weapons, reprocesses, or does not reprocess, is all about whether or not we're having bilateral negotiations, is to basically ignore the reality of what North Korea has been up to for the past 4 decades with respect to nuclear weapons. You have to negotiate, but you have to have pressure. Now, Senator Obama has come around to this position. And sometimes in the McCain campaign, I'm accused of secretly working for Senator Obama. Why?
He is.
Because a year ago in the primary, the senator said he would meet unconditionally himself, he was very clear about that, with the leaders of North Korea, Iran, Cuba. He said it 4 times, twice in the debates. It was on his website. The McCain campaign dutifully downloaded all that and kept it for the record. He started getting heat on it. It played quite well to the MoveOn.org crowd that was out in the Iowa caucus and so forth. He started backing away from it, and then he said, of course, there would be preparations. You don't just go in. It would be a time of my choosing. Adjusted a bit. Took a bit more heat. Then he said it would be principled, direct, tough negotiations. Frank and I debated at the National Press Club a month ago, and I said, Senator Obama keeps saying this, but he never says there will be consequences if North Korea doesn't do what we want. So out comes the Obama campaign statement on the most recent North Korea agreement, and it says, and I quote, President Bush's decision to remove North Korea from the state sponsors is an appropriate response as long as there is a clear understanding that if North Korea fails to follow through, there will be immediate consequences. So I expect royalties. I'm glad to see Senator Obama's coming around. But I think the starting position of the two candidates reveals something about their understanding of power in the international system, the nature of regimes like North Korea, and the role of diplomacy as a tool, not an end, in how we approach these kind of problems.
Thanks. All right. Frank, you want to take on the KORUS FTA?
Well, just briefly on North Korea and engagement. Senator Obama hasn't changed his position on the circumstances under which he would engage in direct high-level diplomacy with North Korea or other countries. And the fact that he is willing to do so without first demanding preconditions, that a country has to agree to all of the things that we are seeking as a precondition to having the opportunity for us to tell them what it is that we want them to do. That hasn't changed either. But it was never his position that you go into such meetings without preparation, that you go into such meetings willy-nilly, and I'm surprised that anyone would assume that that would affect his position. On North Korea and engagement, again, I really hope that this is the John McCain we get, and not the John McCain who said in 1999 that he supported a policy of rogue state rollback. And that again in 2000 on the GOP debate with Larry King, he said our policy concerning these rogue states like North Korea says, I would arm, train, equip, both from without and within, forces that would eventually overthrow the governments and install free and democratically elected governments. That's a different kind of engagement. It's engagement, but it's not six-party diplomacy. Obviously, you're going to have credible diplomacy. It has to be backed by a threat of force. I think it was Zhou Enlai who talked about diplomacy being a continuation of war by other means. It's a struggle with North Korea. And you don't take any of your leverage off the table. I think what Senator Obama objects to is the idea that we would go into that struggle with our most powerful tools in the shed. The power of our ideas, the power of our democracy, the power of our economy, the power of our alliances. We are the most powerful military country on the planet. But if we try to fight for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula using only our military tools and the powers of coercion, we will not succeed. We need to deploy the full arsenal of America's democracy to solve this problem. And of course, there are consequences, or should be, when North Korea behaves contrary to their commitments, or when they flagrantly violate their international commitments, as